It was the worst aviation accident ever. 583 fatalities. We're going to be talking, Christy and I, about Tenerife. Hello and welcome to the Taking Off podcast. It's Dan Milliken. I'm here with who?
Christy Wong. And I think is it Tenerife?
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that right away. And the thing is, I researched this just minutes ago, talking to somebody from Madrid. Also pulled it up on some Europeans' YouTube to find out what they were saying. And it is 100% Tenerife. That's how they say it.
Tenerife.
Now,
okay. But if you say it like that, you have to say it with an accent.
Yes, I agree. So the American, and by the way, I've mentioned this before in a video, and I got comments. No, you pronounced it wrong. But no, it's not Tenerife. It's almost like a throwaway. Tenerife is how I heard the Spanish person saying it.
Well, just for the sake of simplicity, because I am not a Spaniard and I'm terrible at pronouncing things, I'm probably just going to say Tenerife. I
think that's fine.
For that.
I think that's fine because you say Tenerife and the purists will get mad at you. I'll say Tenerife and the Americans will get mad at me. Now, as soon as I started
nobody's happy.
Yeah, exactly. And as soon as I started this podcast, there is some kind of major vacuum cleaner right outside my window. I don't know what they're doing on the outside of this building. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but hopefully not. But regardless, this is a podcast.
But I also don't have the super speaker.
This is a podcast. This is not our normal video. I might put some pictures up, but that's all we're going to see. Okay, Christy, March 27th, 1977. I'll set the stage a little bit. In accidents, aviation accidents, we always talk about that it's a chain, and that if any link in the chain got broken, the accident could have been avoided. And that is so true here. But with all the links in the chain, it still boils down to one man, and we'll get to that in a second. But to set the beginning chains, the beginning links in the chain. So in 1977, the Canary Islands were ruled by Spain, and they're just off the Morocco coast. There was somebody from the Canaries that was living in Algiers and had created an organization to try to get the Canary Islands to be independent or independently ruled. This guy never had more than 100 members, by the way, and he got a couple of guys to basically put a small bomb in the flower shop on the main big airport in the Canary Islands on Gran Canaria, and the Los Rodeos airport, Las Palmas airport. And the bomb went off. Somebody called giving them 15-minute warning, and nobody was killed. And I've read differing reports that 4 people were injured or 8 people were injured. But when they called and said a bomb was going to go off in 15 minutes, they actually said bombs, or they said 2 bombs. And so the airport authorities shut down the airport just as several big international flights were coming in, and others, including the Pan Am flight, Pan Am 1736 from New York, as well as KLM 4805 from Amsterdam, Canary Islands being a very big tourist attraction. And so both pilots of the 747s, the Pan Am Clipper and the KLM, requested to hold. Both were denied that after a little bit and were sent to an alternate airport at Tenerife and the Los Rodeos airport, which was the main airport over there, but still not as big. They had almost finished a new airport on Tenerife that actually had ground radar. But again, another link in the chain, that airport wasn't ready. So they were all the planes that were diverted from Las Palmas were sent over to Tenerife for, now both 747s had plenty of fuel to hold for a couple of hours. And at the end of it all, it was only about a 2-hour wait on the ground at Tenerife. So with that, I've set the stage. What do you think, Christy? Have I got anything wrong, first of all?
I don't think you've necessarily gotten anything wrong. The problem with this situation is that there is a lot to unpack. You mentioned several links in the chain, and yeah, like going back and looking through and studying the accident, it's like if one of those things had not happened, we would not be we would not be talking about this.
No,
We
we
would be
wouldn't.
talking about it as a disaster that was averted, or maybe it just didn't even happen.
Yeah, we
But
wouldn't
there
have
were a
talked about it at all
lot
because
of
we wouldn't have
things.
known. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so of course that first link is that Tenerife was not the destination airport for either of these flights. Um, and for the reasons obviously you just discussed. The planes, they wanted to hold, they were told no. ATC was in a frenzy. They were like, we don't know how long Las Palmas is going to be closed for. Send them away. So even though both of the 747s requested holding, they were just immediately denied. Just go to Los Rodeos. They're like, okay, whatever. Los Rodeos, really important to talk about the location of Los Rodeos because it plays an important factor. It is located at the northern tip of the Tenerife Island, which is a volcanic island. I say volcanic meaning it's like the Hawaiian Islands. It was created over millions of years from volcanoes. So you've got that like rocky, mountainous, volcanic. I mean, it's a beautiful island. I personally would love to visit because it just sounds amazing. But because of its location at the north end of the airport, at the north end of the island, it has a predisposition of thick fog. You get that the air that rushes in from the Atlantic, and bam, you just get the fog right there with the mountains.
Right.
In
And stuff
fact,
that would just flow in within minutes. It was totally clear when those guys landed. Within 2 hours, it was totally fogged in.
exactly. In fact, they had recently, within recent years, put an ILS system in to that airport, even though it was just a quote unquote regional airport, because of the fog. They wanted to make sure airplanes could still get in.
And here's another chain that's not often talked about when talking about Tenerife, and that is the Dutch legislation that was recently passed right before this accident. There wasn't much regulation as far as crew schedule, but the Netherlands had just passed sweeping reform on the crews having a very, very tight schedule and that they couldn't, overwork them, right? So that was actually one of the things that really affected the captain of the Dutch airplane, Jacob van Zanten, and we're going to mention van Zanten quite a bit. And he was everybody knows this that has looked into this. He was the face of KLM, literally. He was used for their promotion pictures and everything else. He was the senior most captain at KLM. He trained everybody, spent a lot of time in the flight sims, probably not as many hours actually in the cockpit as maybe some of the others, but he was the guy at KLM, and I think he knew it. And one of the things that was discussed...
Oh, he knew it.
Oh, yeah. And one of the things discussed on the way over was this new legislation and how, actually not on the way over, it was actually discussed on the ground. It was still on the cockpit voice recorder from right before they taxied and took off. They were talking about this, and Van Zanten was a little bit worried that if they flew back over to Las Palmas, that they would not be able to make the trip back to Amsterdam before he'd have to overnight in Las Palmas. And he thought his wife would freak out hearing about a bomb, blah, blah, blah. And so what he decided to do sitting on the ground in Tenerife was to go ahead and fill up the tanks so that he wouldn't have to do that in Las Palmas. They could turn immediately and get back up to Amsterdam, making the deadline. So that was a big, big, big chain, because now instead of just having 2 hours of fuel, which on a 747 really isn't that much, now he had full tanks of jet fuel all over.
Yeah. And of course, what what that did a couple of things as well, is it delayed their departure by about
That's
30
right.
minutes or so.
Yeah, it did.
So if he had, yeah, and here's the thing about Van Zanten, okay? He was, how do I say this nicely? He was intense.
Yes.
He just was one of those personalities that he had the status, like you said, he knew it, but people like genuinely feared him, and his crew members would speak up, but he would shoot them down. He
Yes.
kind of had that like God complex. So I know that the crew members actually said, "Hey, you know what? It would be better for us to fuel in Las Palmas because the fuel is cheaper and this and that." And Van Zanten just shut them down. No questions asked. No, we fuel now because fuel now, then we don't have to wait and get fuel in Las Palmas. Plus, there's probably going to be other aircraft in Las Palmas that want to fuel. So you know what? We fuel now. He had the definition of get there itis. He figured that they were going to wind up getting stuck in Las Palmas if he didn't act right then and there. And because of that, he was go, 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 and didn't really think, much about the consequences of what he was saying and doing. He was very easily agitated. And I don't know if that was him on just a normal day-to-day basis, or if
it sounds like it was him on a normal day-to-day basis. However, it was amplified by all the different things going on. And it's a great lesson for me as a pilot to, I can get frustrated with, getting, maybe I'm late getting to the airport because I got behind a train, heading to Hicks Airfield. And then you get frustrated there. And now you're getting behind the clock, and you let these things stress, and you let these things impact decisions rather than, okay, take a deep breath. Everything's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Let's just take our time. It was a good lesson for me.
Well, funny enough, and we'll kind of talk about the consequences and the changes and the legacy of this accident later. But one of the things that we are often asked during airline interviews now is, hey, you've got a captain that wants to go, and you see an issue with leaving, whether it's frost on the wings or you don't think that you got proper clearance to cross this taxiway or proper clearance to take off, what do you do? That is an actual interview question,
right,
that we are given.
Well,
now.
And at the end of this, we'll talk about the impact of this accident on the aviation industry, because that's one, and there's quite a bit, and I'll let you get into that in a minute. One thing too is that with his decision, so they fly to Las Palmas originally. They get put in holds right there by the airport, and then immediately told to divert to Los Rodeos on Tenerife. And they land, and they don't know exactly how long, but they think the airport's going to be open fairly quickly. And the KLM actually lets their passengers off into the terminal. Pan Am requests the same, but they're denied because there's not enough room. So the Pan Am airplane is actually very loose. The people are feeling good. It's all vacation. It's mostly elderly people who are going to be going on a cruise. And the captain of Captain Victor Grubb of the Pan Am Clipper actually invites people up to the cockpit and shows them and that kind of stuff, which then you contrast that to the KLM deck, where you've got this incredibly authoritarian dictating exactly what's going to happen, and you've got an idea, well, shut up, this is the way it's going to be. And it was two totally different things. So then the captain, Van Zanten, decides to refuel, and within minutes they get the all clear from Las Palmas. So now the Pan Am can take off, right? Well, the way the Dutch KLM was parked, there wasn't quite enough room for the Pan Am to get by. So he had to wait, and they just started taking on that fuel. So Grubb, the captain of Pan Am, calls the KLM, and Van Zanten tells him, it's still going to be another 20 minutes. And so Grubb actually sends his FO, his first officer, and the engineer outside the plane. They deplane and go look and measure and see if they think they can get by the KLM, and they cannot. And there's another chain.
They're short by only 12 feet.
Wow.
I actually read that. Yeah, it was a matter of 12 feet. Here's another interesting thing too that delayed the KLM even more. When they let the passengers off, they were trying to get the passengers back on. Well, two children from the KLM plane had gone missing. They had wandered off, and that delayed them by a few minutes as well because they had to go and like find this family, the parents that were looking for these kids. And so that actually had consequences as well. In fact, in later interviews, it was like one of the gate agents. He came forward and said, yeah, he said that he had lingering guilt because he had found that family and shuffled them back on the airplane and effectively shuffled them onto their death.
Well, here's 248 passengers on the KLM. There were actually 249 that arrived. Did you know that?
I did know that. Robina Van something. Oh gosh, what was her last name? Van
It's very Dutch
or something.
Yeah,
it's very Dutch.
So her boyfriend,
Robina Van Lanschot. Sorry.
And her boyfriend was on Tenerife, and she requested to remain behind, and it was granted. So she was in a car with her boyfriend driving away from the airport when all this happened.
Yeah, she actually, I believe she lived there. And so she was like, either she lived there or her boyfriend lived there.
Her boyfriend did.
That was her, that was her final destination anyway. So she was like, well, instead of going to Las Palmas staying the night and then flying back here, I mean, like, I'm literally right here. So I'm just
that would never happen today.
Right. And she had two airplanes. Oh my gosh. Two friends on the airplane that agreed to get her luggage or, that day or whatever. And then she would just pick it up from them later.
Yeah, that did happen.
Yeah, that did not happen. So unfortunately.
So that's all setting the stage. So now the Pan Am Clipper has to wait for the KLM to refuel. The KLM gets to go first and is given by the tower at Tenerife, is given clearance to begin taxiing. And what's interesting, I found.
But the problem is that the fog had started to roll in. Right. Now.
Yeah. So and it was worsening minute by minute. So they were given taxi release by the tower as soon as they were told to back taxi up the runway and all the way to the end and then do a 360. Actually, first they were told to exit Charlie 3, but they were unclear. The tower was, or actually the approach, and we'll get to that in a second. It was really hard to understand the accent between first and third. And so they're saying first exit and third exit, and they weren't sure if did you say first exit? So there was a lot of confusion going on, even with the KLM. So
but the third exit didn't make sense for them.
Well, neither did the first. It was only the fourth.
Right.
Yeah, and we'll get to that with the Pan Am. But what I thought was interesting is as soon as the planes were put on the runway, they were turned over from tower to approach control, which I found interesting. And it was the approach control that was having the third confusion. And I don't know why he didn't say exit Charlie 1, exit Charlie 3, exit Charlie 4. He was saying first exit, third exit. That's more confusing. And of course, that was one of the impacts was the communication standardization came out of Tenerife. So the Dutch plane is sent all the way to the end of the runway, and now the Pan Am flight is given taxi permission.
Right. They want the Pan Am to taxi basically behind the KLM. They want KLM to hold in position while Pan Am taxis down, takes that same exit basically, and then lines up, because that'll save them a lot of time basically. If they have these two jumbos taxiing basically at the same time, once Pan Am is off the runway, and they can't see a thing. Like, when I say they can't see a thing, like tower cannot see them, they cannot see the other airplanes, that like they can barely see a few feet in front of them. So they're taxiing at like 3 miles an hour. Like, it's really, really, really slow. And the problem with that is that like neither of those 747s could see each other. So when Van Zanten does the 180 at the end of the runway and is sitting there, he goes to throttle up, and the first officer is like, hey, we didn't get clearance yet. And so all that does is just agitate Van Zanten in the KLM plane even more. He shoves the throttles down to idle. He's like, yes, I know that. Just go ahead and get clearance for me then. Just call them now then, you know?
Yeah.
And so they're like, I mean, the whole thing is Van Zanten's like, go, 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 go. He's not even thinking about the other airplane at this point.
Well,
even when he's told to think about the other airplane, he's not thinking about the other airplane.
and there's confusion on the clearance. Are you, they were given route clearance, and Van Zanten's like, no, we've been given clear to take off. I mean, there was a lot of misunderstandings and unclear communication going on, and then probably one of the biggest links in this chain was when Pan Am is listening to all this, and they reach out saying, when they hear Van Zanten getting all gung ho, and they reach out, hey, you guys know we're still on the runway. At the same time, Regional Approach is saying something to the Dutch, saying, hey, don't take off, and they walk on each other, and Van Zanten hears neither.
Right. All he heard
was okay.
The controller saying okay, but the controller was saying,
okay,
you're not cleared to take off.
You're not cleared to take off. Yeah.
So, here's the thing with that is, there was a miscommunication because of the garbled transmission, but at the end of the day, Zanten's interpretation, his own personal interpretation, because even his crew said, I don't think we've been cleared to take off.
Even the flight engineer spoke up. Yeah.
Right. Yep. The flight engineer was like, hey, is that Pan Am off the runway yet? Like, I don't think he's off the runway yet.
And the captain's, yes.
He's like, oh, yes. Like, nope. Again, he doesn't even care. And so to me, I don't think really it was necessarily a miscommunication or whatever, because like the other flight crew
knew,
very obvious on the CDR. They knew what was going on, and they were along for the ride at that point, because Van Zanten was just, he was a bully.
Not only that was, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the environment in the cockpit. The captain was God, and you don't question God. And so, that was across the industry, wasn't it?
And no.
Okay.
So.
And by the way, Christy, your phone's kind of cutting in and out, so I don't know what's going on, but just so you know.
Oh, okay, that's weird. I'm like just sitting here. Okay, so yes and no, because you can definitely see a vast difference in the flight deck crew environment on the Pan Am airplane. Things were lighthearted. They were trying to keep the tension down. They were trying to keep
relaxed.
They were trying to, yeah, exactly. Even in the super high stress environment, the captain of the Pan Am in no way, shape, or form bullied his flight crew. He was like, hey, why don't we try this? And I mean, they were talking back and forth about it. Meanwhile, Captain Van Zanten was very bullyish, very like, we do this my way, you have no say so. But there have been other accidents were contributing factors to, the captain being a bully and whatnot, before the advent of what we consider modern day CRM or crew resource management. I can't remember the actual airline, but I know that there was an Asian airline where the captain, basically the first officer, was afraid to speak up because, the captain was God, basically, and you don't say anything. If the captain says it's okay to go on this closed runway, well, then I guess we go on the closed runway. You just don't speak up. The first officer didn't speak up, and therefore they wound up crashing and dying.
Well, let's kind of skip ahead then for a minute, because you mentioned crew resource management. That was a big thing
CRM.
That came out of this specific accident. So what is that?
Yes. So crew resource management is basically, it provides an environment so that all crew members have a say in what happens versus just the captain authority. And I go back to the HR questions during the interview for the airlines now, when they ask us, hey, what do? You go outside, it's, you're up north, it's a cool April morning, there's frost on the wings. The airline has a no frost policy. What do you do if the captain's like, yeah, no, it'll be fine. We'll be fine. Let's just go. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
basically what they want you to know as a first officer candidate is that you have the authority to speak up. Whether it's you speak up and tell the captain, if the captain still brushes you off, you contact, the pilot help desk or the chief pilot. You do what you need to do to ensure the safety of yourself, the plane, and the passengers. Versus before the captain had the full, at the end of the day, yeah, the captain has the final authority. But if you feel like it's a safety issue, especially in a situation like that, you need to have the courage and know that you have the authority to speak up.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm not in that world and you are. What would happen if an FO did? And let's take that same exact situation. There's frost on the wings. The captain wants to take off. The FO's like, well, no, we got this. The captain says, we're going to do it anyway. Are you saying that the FO could jump on his iPad or whatever and reach out to the chief pilot right then and lodge a complaint as they're taxiing down? How does that work?
No, basically it gives you the authority to speak up and say, hey, captain, I really think we should get defrosted before we take off.
Okay, so then the captain says, no, we're going to be fine. Let's go. Then what?
Well, then you jump on your iPad, you go to the FOM or the Flight Operations Manual, and you pull up where it says in the FOM, hey, it says here that if there's frost on the wings, we need to get defrosted. We need to call the de-ice truck and have them come over. If the captain still gets, persnickety with you, at that point, the first officer has the authority and the courage to say, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm going to have to, call somebody if you're insisting that we go. And at that point, if the captain still escalates it, there are other things you can do. You can say, I don't feel safe on this flight. You basically call out from working the flight. Now the flight can't go at all. And you just deal with the consequences later, in which case you plead your case to the chief pilot or the, safety manager or whoever.
Okay. Now what if, let's say there was a little bit of sparkle on the wings, but it really wasn't frost, and the captain knew that, but the FO's being, I guess, a FO version of a Karen, and they escalated it. And what if the chief pilot says there was not a problem with this? What happens to that brave, courageous FO Karen?
At that point, it's a learning lesson for the FO, but
and for all the other pilots that fly with the FO.
But here's the thing: is I'd rather reap the consequences as a first officer and being wrong in that situation versus being an NTSB report because I didn't have the courage to speak up. Yeah. I'm at least alive to plead my case. Worst case scenario at that point, the FO gets sent to training or something, or does some sort of remedial training.
Figuratively Siberia of aviation, right?
Right, exactly. Worst case scenario in this situation in Tenerife is that the first officer, if I were the first officer in that case, and I knew that Pan Am had a very good inkling that the Pan Am was still on the runway, I would have reached over and slapped my hands down on the throttle so freaking fast. And you know what? Let the captain get mad at me. Let him yell at me. Let him scream at me. My feet are on the brakes. The throttles are down to idle. He's like, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. I get on the radio. Pan Am, are you still on the runway? Pan Am says, affirmative, still on the runway. I look at the captain and say, sir, Pan Am is still on the runway. Let him get snarky with me. Let him get whatever. But you know what? I'm alive at that point.
Right.
They didn't do that.
No, they didn't.
The authority to do something like that. So literally, they were just like, God, please let us get off the runway in time. But because of all those links in the chain, all the factors, the extra fuel, they were super heavy now, etc. They might have been able to take off.
Had they not
might
fueled,
have actually been they might have been able to skirt over the top of that Pan Am. It would have been scary. Pan Am would have been like, what the what? But because they were so heavy, they had no chance.
They almost cleared. So let's now talk about the accident sequence. So Pan Am, Captain Grubb sees the lights of the Pan Am and thinks that it's sitting still because the lights are coming right at you. They're not moving. Then it hits him. Oh my gosh, the guy is coming towards us. He's, and so both the FO and the captain, the FO calls out, get off, get off, get off. And Pan Am immediately uses the tiller full. They throttle up. They're going 20 knots as fast as they can at that point to get off the runway from 3 knots to 20 and just immediate into the grass, just left turn. And, now Van Zanten sees the Pan Am. They're at V1. So he yells a Dutch expletive. It's the last thing that's heard, and he yanks the yoke back. The Dutch 747 gets airborne. The furthest right engine collides with the first class section of the Pan Am, that big bulge on the 747, and the gear makes contact with the top of the Pan Am. And they continue down another 100, 150 meters and then impact the runway with no gear, and immediately explosion, fire, and all 248 people on the KLM immediately die. In the meantime, the Pan Am is a burning wreck as well. However, the people up front, including the flight deck, survive. So there were a few people that survived, few being like, I think I forgot to get that number, like, was it 90 or something? But in all, there was a total of 583 fatalities with these two 747s.
I think 61 people survived.
That sounds
And they
right.
were all from the Pan Am. And, Robina was considered like the quote unquote only survivor of KLM, but that's because she wasn't on the KLM.
She wasn't on it, right. But every single person
Exactly,
that was on that KLM died. Yeah, and so
and extra fuel on board absolutely sealed their fates because the thing literally burst into a ball of flames.
Yeah, and
there was just absolutely no surviving it.
Had the fuel been off, there's a good chance they could have cleared the Pan Am. So, okay.
It was. And the thing is that the fog was so thick that the controllers didn't even know that the Pan Am was also involved. They thought that the KLM, they didn't realize what had happened. They thought maybe the KLM went off the runway or did whatever. So they sent out the fire trucks to the KLM. I believe it was the KLM they sent it to first. But they didn't realize that the other was out there and involved as well. When they found out, the controllers were basically despondent.
Yeah, they were faced with something that nobody had ever faced before. The crash of two passenger-laden 747s.
Yeah.
So,
and the KLM was burning so intensely. I did read this. It took like hours for them to put out the flames.
Yeah.
It was just absolutely crazy. But it also goes to show you how thick that fog was, because even the massive like heat and fire and everything else did not dissipate that fog at all.
Yeah. Absolutely horrible, absolutely tragic. Besides CRM, crew resource management, what else from this crash made an impact into the way 121 operations are done today?
Standard ATC transmissions became a big thing.
Yep.
It used to be that you could just say Roger or copy that or Wilco, and sometimes people still do that. But if it's something that high risk situation, you can get away with Roger or something of that nature. But now they standardize ATC transmissions. They also re-emphasized English as the standard language of aviation, because the controllers were so hard to like understand, and the flight, various flight crews and stuff. Really and truly, I think it was the Pan Am that was the most proficient in English. In fact, I think this on the CVR, they were Captain Van Zanten and his crew, they were transmitting in English, but I think in the flight deck they were actually speaking in Dutch.
Is it pretty standard that
correctly.
On the flight deck of a non-English originating flight that they speak English even on the flight deck? I thought it was just on radio communications.
No, Well, and that's the thing. But they were like the controllers. I think they didn't have a lot of practice speaking
No, I
English,
mean
and I
first
think
and
that's
third, you couldn't figure. Yeah, you couldn't understand which one they were
uh,
saying. Yeah,
exactly. I just know that speaking English in the aviation realm became even more emphasized. That was already the rule, but they just re-emphasized that. Um, I know that for sure. You know, we talked about the CRM. Um, I think they wound up building another airport on Tenerife on the south end that wasn't so susceptible to that kind of
well,
fog as well.
that airport was almost complete at this time of this accident, and it had ground radar at that
Gotcha.
airport. Yeah, so
Gotcha.
it
Okay.
just hadn't opened yet.
Okay. I didn't realize it was under
So yeah,
construction.
it was another chain or another link in the chain. So
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is, I know this kind of led the way. I know they talked about ground radar and stuff like that, but really importantly for us as pilots in the flight deck, we get iPads with GPS tracking on it. So we can literally, just like ForeFlight, right? Except it's the, like the company version effectively of ForeFlight. It'll actually tell you where you are at on the runway. And then there is other apps that like as GA pilots, I know we could use too. Like Flight Radar 24. We could pull up Flight Radar 24 and say, oh, okay, well, there's Dan and Lola down at the end of the runway. You know,
right.
not that we would ever do that out of Hicks in the fog or whatever, but we have a lot more technological tools available. And I think a lot of it was born out of this accident and accidents like it.
Yeah.
Hey, what do we do, you know, to better see? In fact, we have low visibility taxi procedures in place that we have to practice for during check rides and recurrents and stuff like that.
Probably all because of Tenerife. So, okay, last thoughts. I've got some, but I'll let you go first.
So they said that the official cause of the accident was Captain Van Zanten's attempt to take off without a proper clearance. And there were certainly a lot of links in that chain that led up to them being in position for that to happen. But in my opinion, at the end of the day, it was Captain Van Zanten's hazardous attitudes which caused this accident. There were many factors that contributed to it. You know, the diversions, the fog, the misunderstandings, the radio comm, you know, all that stuff, right? But if Captain Van Zanten had slowed his roll and not been such a jerk, this terrible accident would not have happened. If he had just sat on that runway for, you know, one more minute, 2 more minutes, that would have been the difference.
Between 583 people losing their life.
Exactly. Including Captain Van Zanten. I find it highly ironic, too, that the KLM's first response to the accident was somebody call Captain Van Zanten. He needs to get on scene, blah, 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 not realizing that it was that captain that caused this whole thing.
Well, and they fought when it came out that, you know, the cause of this accident was, you know, Captain Van Zanten. The KLM fought back for quite a while before they finally admitted, yes, okay, it was his fault. We'll pay the survivor. You know,
Why do we do that? Why do we, you know, I mean, as humans, right? Because companies are just made up of populations of people. Why is there a propensity for us to forego taking responsibility or having defensive situations like this? Why couldn't they have looked at it and gone, "Oh man, he messed up. You know, we need to fix this. Like this is a problem."
Well, maybe
clearly,
it's because
instead
they think,
they fought against it.
Maybe they look at it and go, yeah, we're clearly in the wrong, but if we fight it, maybe we won't have to pay as much. Maybe there's some of that going on. I don't know, but it's horrible.
No.
And if the world would take responsibility for stuff, that would be really different. All right, so here's
dude. I don't know if you watched the MH370 documentary, but they talked about that too. Like, I mean, that's a completely separate topic, but just the Malaysian government not wanting to take responsibility for certain things. Yeah, so that's a different topic for a different day.
Well, that's because it was aliens. But yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
True.
My big takeaway is it reminds me on a micro scale of of two situations, one that was mine and then one that was a tragedy that happened here in North Texas a couple of years ago. And I'll start with the one in North Texas. So there was a twin-engine plane that took off with a captain that had a very similar attitude as Van Zanten. And so it was just a small King Air with 8 people on board, a family, and some family friends. And the captain just wanted somebody to sit in the right seat who would just shut up and let him fly. And he made that clear. And when he had trouble on takeoff because of his hazardous attitude, he wasn't, the FO wasn't able to really help him, or didn't choose to because he'd been shut down so much. So, and it resulted in the death of those people because of that hazardous attitude. Then I think about a situation with mine. So and being safe, my whole thing, superior judgment trumps superior skills. I say that slogan more to remind myself than others. And there was a time I was in Lola just not even a year ago, but because I had superior judgment, I brought along another pilot to help me, a young guy, very good pilot. And he had been landing Lola better than just about anybody else who's flown Lola. And he's doing great. He was very conscientious and everything else. And I was trying to get back to AirVenture because we had to leave AirVenture in the middle of the show to go to something, and I took him along to help me. And we had a problem with the alternator, and at night, we put down at the nearest airport. And I'm sitting here trying to restart the alternator. The belt looks good. And maybe if I try to tighten the belt, whatever, let's start it again, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there after failed attempt after failed attempt. And the young kid looks at me and in his Southern accent says, "Well, Dan, seems to me you just got some get there-itis." And dang it, he was absolutely right. And it stung. But you know what? He was right. So at that moment, I pulled my phone out and I got us a hotel room or rooms and said, "We'll deal with this tomorrow. We're not going to make the show." So,
yeah.
But anyway, so I could have very easily been authoritarian and said, "Shut up, get in the plane, let's go." But no, that would have been the wrong call. And so anyway, that's my takeaways on this horrible, horrible accident.
Yeah, get there-itis is a real thing. We've all experienced it. As an airline pilot, I've been in situations, man, it was funny. There was a situation, I picked up a turn. This was several months ago. Picked up a turn. We were flying down to Mexico and back. And I decided, it's just a turn. We'll be back. So I just took a day bag with me. And that's number one right there is I just jinxed myself,
Right.
because I just took a day bag. Well, it turns out that we wound up having an issue and we were going to wind up getting stuck in Mexico because we were going to time out because of this issue. If we didn't dispatch was literally sending us messages through our ACARs. If we're not off the ground in 20 minutes, we're going to get stuck. They're going to have to cancel the flight. And then it was like, oh my gosh, can we please go so that we don't get stuck here? And at the end of the day, the worst that would have happened is, we would have gotten stuck and we would have had to get a hotel and we wouldn't have gotten back till the next day, et cetera. And that would have sucked, but, we'd be alive. The issue that we had wasn't a safety issue, fortunately. It was just a delay because of the ground crew at the airport we were at. But either way, those things do happen. We have very strict time constraints on us as pilots. We can extend those time constraints a little bit, but the FAA is very, very, very strict about making sure that we are within those time constraints. Fortunately, they resolved the issue and we were able to get out on time for that particular. I've never taken a day bag again though, even just a turn.
Right.
I just take the full shebang.
Yeah.
But happens.
Oh, I lost you again. Okay.
No, I said it happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for listening. If you're watching it on YouTube or listening on YouTube, that's the podcast part of YouTube. I'll throw a picture or two up, but there's not a moving video. And we also have it on all the all the podcast methods you use, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, whatever. So thanks for listening to our podcast, the Taking Off Podcast. And you guys stay safe, and remember, superior judgment does indeed trump superior skills. Take care.